Hi, my name is Bente, I'm the Norris Witch. I have Scotty, my cat, right here, so if I'm doing this, then that is because a cat demands my attention, as always when I'm filming, or let's be honest, as always in general. Today's video is about how you can work on and deepen your psychic skills. I realized through a comment just yesterday actually that I'm always talking about working on your psychic skills and that this should be one of the first things that you should do as a beginner witchcraft practitioner or in general any kind of magical practitioner, because it's very, very important for both spirit communication as well as spellcraft. And for example, I mentioned it in my, I think it's called Essential Tips for Beginner Witches or something like that. But I never actually talked about how you can do that. At least I don't think I did. So let's just do an entire video on it. So first of all, I think it's very important to say very clearly that everyone has psychic skills. At least that is my personal conviction, that everybody has psychic skills. Even people who don't even believe in them, I think, have psychic skills somewhere buried deep down, but they're suppressing them or just explaining them away, but they are there. They're just usually not trained, especially when we are being raised in Western society where everything is hyper-rationalized and basically anything that can't be explained does not exist. People are taught to unlearn their psychic skills, but I still firmly believe that every single person has psychic skills and that you can train them. But the thing is that you have to train them like any other skill. Just like you are not starting to paint and then instantly expect yourself to be a master painter, or like you start playing soccer, for example, and then just expect yourself to be perfect at it from the start, or like you would train a muscle, for example. It's the same thing with your psychic abilities. Sure, there are some people who are just insanely talented and who can just see spirits without having to do anything for it, or who can feel energies without really having to do anything for it, who were maybe raised by very supportive parents, who were maybe even also magical practitioners, so they maybe even were taught as children, or who were just simply not taught to unlearn it, but who were just supported in their skills. Of course, those people, yeah, sure, they will start at a different level. Just like some people have a talent for painting or drawing or a specific sport or something like that, or maths or whatever. Some people have that kind of talent, but everybody has to practice their psychic skills. And just because you don't really feel like you have psychic abilities doesn't mean that you don't have them. You just have to train them. That's the hard part about it. And what I also see a lot of times is that some people seem to have psychic abilities, but they just don't realize it because they have been raised in such a hyper-rationalist society that they were just basically gaslighting themselves and telling themselves that what they're feeling or seeing or perceiving is not real. So some people have a talent for psychic abilities and they don't even realize it. For me, for example, that was the case. I am pretty clairsentient, so I have a very, very easy time sensing, like physically sensing energies. So I can take an object, a crystal, a plant, whatever thing in my hand, or even just touch a person or an animal or something like that, and I can sense the energy. And that has been easy for me for quite some time. But before I got into witchcraft, I didn't realize what that was. I always wondered, why do I have this weird prickly feeling? Like, that's just strange. And I actually have the ability to raise my own energy very quickly and very heavily, and it's hard to keep up, and it's a very weird prickly tingly feeling in my entire body that I can't really stand for a long time. And I always wondered, what the heck is that? And I couldn't explain it to myself, and I couldn't figure out what it is until I got into witchcraft and I learned about psychic abilities and that sensing energies is a thing. So you see, some people even have a talent that they are just not aware of. But if you are jumping into training your psychic abilities, there is a very good chance that you will figure out, oh, this is actually pretty easy for me. And there we come to something that I have kind of figured out through YouTube comments and just talking to other practitioners. It seems to me like everyone has one psychic ability that works best for them. So as for me, for example, it's feeling energies, it's clairsentience. But for some people, for example, it might be clairvoyance, so they are seeing energies. For some people, it may be clairgustance, so they're tasting them, or clairaudience, so they're hearing them. Everybody seems to have one clairsense that is strongest for them, and I would always advise anyone to just first of all, figure out what that one sense is. What is the one skill that works best for you? Usually in life, we want to make things easier for ourselves. So if we're already great at painting, we will probably pursue painting and not maths. So at least for the first step, try to figure out what your strongest clairsense is. And there is one exercise that I have learned that made it very, very easy for me to figure out which clairsense was the strongest for me. I think it's called the orange tree exercise or something like that. I think it is originally from one of Christopher Panczak's Temple of Witchcraft books. I think. I might be wrong, it has been a couple of years since I've been taught that exercise, but I think it's originally from there. And I think it has been done originally with an orange tree, but you could do it with whatever kind of plant. An orange tree would just be something that probably a lot of people are more familiar with. And the exercise is basically very, very simple. You just visualize an orange tree, and yes, I know some people can't visualize, I will get into that later, doesn't matter right now. You're trying to visualize and fully conceptualize an orange tree. So you're trying to see it, and that will be the first step. So you're trying to, with closed eyes, to imagine an orange tree before you. So you would try to see the leaves, you would try to see the bark, you try to see the oranges on the tree and anything surrounding the orange tree. Then you would go up to that tree and try to touch the tree. So you're trying to touch the bark, maybe the leaves, you can touch the oranges, everything like that. And you try to hear everything around that tree. So maybe there is wind rustling in the leaves, maybe there is a bird sitting in the tree singing, or there are maybe insects who are making some kind of noise. So you're trying to hear it. Then you are going to pluck an orange from the tree, and you are trying to basically open the orange and then smell it, because oranges have a very pungent smell. Anyone who has ever smelled an orange, which I would guess are most people who are seeing this video, if you've ever smelled an orange, you know that it's a very, very specific smell, and a lot of people will be familiar with that because a lot of people drink orange juice, for example. So I guess that's probably why an orange tree was chosen for this exercise, because it has a very distinct color, a very distinct smell, a very distinct feeling. Like the structure of an orange is it's a very distinct one. But yeah, you go on and open that orange, and then you try to smell the orange. And then as a last step, you are trying to peel the orange and then eating it so that you can taste it. So what you're basically trying to do is include all of your senses and imagine that tree and the orange and everything surrounding that as vividly as you can. You try to see it as vividly as you can, you try to hear everything around it as vividly as you can, you try to feel it as vividly as you can, and to taste and to smell it as vividly as you can. If, for example, you can't visualize, you will figure that out very quickly. You will be like, okay, I want to visualize an orange tree, and you see nothing. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that will be the first takeaway from that exercise, that clairvoyance is apparently not your best skill. But you can still do the rest of the exercise, because you can still go up to that something that's probably there that you can't see and try to touch it. So you can basically skip the entire visualization part if that just won't work at all, and just start with touching maybe, or with hearing, or whatever else. And what you will probably figure out if you're doing that exercise is that one or even more of those things that you're doing will be easier for you. You may have a very easy time visualizing that tree, or you have a very easy time feeling the bark. You may have a very easy time hearing the rustling of the wind in the leaves, or smelling the orange, or tasting it. One of these things or more, if you're lucky, will be much easier than the others. So for example, for me, that was feeling the tree. And you will figure that out for yourself. Just take note of everything and then probably write it down afterwards, like what was the easiest part, what was the hardest part. And that is the most important takeaway from that exercise. And now you might say, yeah, sure, like I can visualize a tree, but does that mean that I am clairvoyant? Or yes, I can like conceptualize the feeling, like the physical feeling of birch bark, but does that mean I can sense energies? It's not like you're trying to sense a spirit that's actually there. You're trying to make up an orange tree and then feel it. But in my experience, those two things seem to go hand in hand. So people, for example, who can't really actively visualize, usually also have a very, very hard time just passively sensing something through clairvoyance. Or people who can't conceptualize the feeling of something, the physical feeling, and kind of provoke that feeling, they usually also have a hard time passively, physically sensing energies. So these two things, at least that is my experience, they seem to go hand in hand. So now through that exercise, you have probably figured out what your strongest psychic ability is. That's great. And now you can decide from there, do I want to work on that skill that's already the strongest for me and then hone it so that I can basically rely on it for most of the things that I'm doing, both spirit communication as well as spell work? Or do I want to try to kind of train the other skills that are not as strong yet? I personally went with relying on my strongest skill and just honing that as much as I can. But if you want to try to get the others to the same level, do whatever you want. And now for the training part itself, I think first of all, it works the same way as any other skill, or if you want to train a muscle. Start small and then gradually advance. I think that is pretty important. If you want to train your clairvoyance, probably don't hop right into spirit journeying or into a visualization guided meditation. If you want to, of course you can do that, but it's very easy to feel frustrated when it doesn't work right away. So try to start small and then build on top of that. When it comes to clairvoyance, I want to just quickly mention that there are basically two different kinds. Seeing things with your eyes closed, so basically with your inner eye, just eyes closed and then images are popping up. That is different than seeing things basically like a filter over the material world. Some people have an easier time doing things with closed eyes, and some people have an easier time seeing things with open eyes. So for example, like seeing auras around people or things like that, or literally seeing spirits in their space. It could be one or the other for you, and for some people both work. So yeah, that is just something that I wanted to mention. If you are only trying out one thing and it doesn't really work, maybe try the other thing too. No matter which of these two alternatives you're going for though, I kind of believe that no matter what you want to achieve, for clairvoyance, not the other skills, training visualization will make things easier for you. So I know there are a lot of people who struggle with visualization, and I also did for a very long time. It's getting easier, but I had to train it. So my process was basically to start with a very simple 2D shape. Just sit down, close your eyes and try to visualize a triangle or a square or something like that. Just a very simple 2D shape. And then train that until you feel like it is very easy for you. Then, next up, you will try to color that object. So for me, for example, if I don't intentionally visualize something with a color, it will be just white on black. So if my only goal is, okay, I want to visualize a triangle, I will see a white triangle on a black background. This could be different for you, but that was the case for me. So for me, the next step was to basically color in that triangle. So instead of just a triangle, I would intentionally visualize a blue triangle or a red square or a purple circle or something like that. That was interestingly hard for me for some reason. I don't know why, because if I was to visualize a rose or something, like something that I know from physical life, from the material world, then visualizing it with the color wasn't hard. But if I wanted to actually make something up in my mind and then give it a color, that was very hard for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, that was the next step for me. And then afterwards came visualizing not only a colorful 2D thing, but a colorful 3D shape. So, for example, instead of a circle, a red circle, you would now visualize a red ball. Or instead of a green triangle, you would maybe visualize a green pyramid or something like that. So a 3D shape. And then afterwards, when you have mastered that, you will try to make it spin or just basically make it move in any kind of way so that you can see the 3D shape change while you're moving it. Those were for me the steps that I used to become better at visualization, and clairvoyance also became better while I was training that. So I know training visualization is not necessarily fun, but it also doesn't take a long time. You can do it for 5 minutes every morning or something like that. You will see improvements pretty fast. Then of course I also have tips for clairsentience specifically, because that is the skill that was the strongest for me, so of course I kind of focused on that. Just as with clairvoyance, clairsentience also kind of manifests in different ways. So some people will literally physically feel the energy as like a warm sensation, a cold sensation, a tingling feeling in their body, so in their hand, for example, when they touch something. And some people will feel it more like an emotion. For me, it's kind of a mixture. It's pretty interesting that also occurs. So it could be more of a physical thing. It could also be more of an emotional thing. So if you touch an object, for example, and you get very sad, that could be clairsentience. Or if you are touching an object and you get very happy, that could also be clairsentience. So it's not like you're touching something and you have to physically feel it. It could also just be a full body sensation, like being pulled towards the ground, or feeling happy, or the entire body becoming cold. Whatever it is, just kind of try to figure out what sensations happen in your body when you're doing something. That is kind of the first step that I would say everyone has to master, is kind of figuring out how your clairsentience works. And then again, as always, I would say start small. So for clairsentient people, it would make a lot of sense to, first of all, start with maybe choosing some kind of object or a plant or something and taking that in your hands, and then, of course, as I already said, trying to figure out in general what to expect. But then if you already know what to expect, so you already know, okay, I will feel something in my hands, to kind of work on that. Do that a lot, because then it will get stronger. And at some point you can, from that, switch to touching different kinds of objects. So for example, if you're someone who works with crystals, you could choose different kinds of crystals that are said to have a different kind of energy. So maybe an amethyst versus a carnelian, for example, and then touch those crystals and then see if you feel a difference. This will be very interesting, because the more you are kind of figuring out how different energies feel, it will make it much easier to use that skill on spirits, for example, or objects that you don't know the energy of. So kind of try to level it up like that. So choose different kinds of crystals, maybe choose 4 representations of the different elements. That could maybe be a first step, because if you know what fire, water, earth, and air feel, then maybe if you feel a similar energy for a crystal, you will know, okay, this crystal maybe has a similar energy like this element. Or if you will touch an amulet or something, you will maybe sense the raw direction in which it goes. So is it more fire aligned or more air aligned or something like that? So as a first step, that would make sense. And then of course you could level it up even more. So instead of choosing an object like a crystal or a cup, maybe you could choose a plant and then maybe feel the energy of that plant. It could be a little bit more complex than another physical object. Or you could even sense the energy of a pet if you have one. Or if you want to go even further, you can do it on other people. So if you have someone who is willing to train with you, then maybe you can feel their energy maybe on different body parts. Try to feel their feet or their knees or their belly or their head, and then try to see if different sensations pop up. If their head maybe feels heavier than their belly, maybe, I don't know, maybe they have a migraine. Try to train with something like that, and then who knows, maybe some interesting sensations will pop up. So you see, kind of try to just start very small with just generally more sensing the energy level of an object. Does this have a strong energy or a low energy? And then from there, try to differentiate between different kinds of energies, and then maybe hop from objects to a plant or a pet or a person, and then try to make it more and more difficult for yourself. And since I am not that skilled with the other clairsenses, I don't have any specific exercises for you right now, but there are things that you can train on that would work for any kind of psychic sense. One thing, for example, that could work for any kind of clairsense would be to train with an object that you know has some specific history, because then you know what you could kind of expect. So let's say you can train with someone's wedding ring that has a lot of history, or you could train with, I don't know, a Thor's hammer, or you could train with a specific crystal that you know the associations of. So you can kind of start with an object that you know has or should have some specific energy, and then try to pick up on that. And that will work with any kind of clairsense. The goal is just to focus on one specific sense to begin with, because that will make it much easier. So for example, if you want to train your clairaudience, then maybe take the wedding ring into your hands and then try to hear something and then see what pops up. Maybe you will hear some doves because they were at the wedding, or maybe you will hear people cheering, or maybe you will hear their vows, or maybe you will hear someone throwing rice, or whatever. This will be very, very different for every single person, so I cannot tell you what exactly to expect. But training with an object that has a history that is known to you will make training in the beginning much easier. Also, of course, if you are already doing spirit work, there is always the possibility to try to find a spirit training buddy, basically. Let's say maybe there is an ancestor that you're working pretty closely with. There's always the possibility of kind of trying to get them to train with you. Give them a little offering and then ask them to give you some kind of energy, give you an image or some kind of sound or a smell or something like that. So ask them to basically try to communicate something specific with you so that you can try to pick up on that. This can be pretty fun, but this can also be pretty challenging. So this is probably not the first thing that you want to do. And then lastly, of course, you can train with another practitioner who is pretty skilled at energy manipulation. For example, if you want to train your clairvoyance and the other person knows how to do energy manipulation, then this person can basically create some kind of energy, could be the energy of a specific element or whatever, go wild. But this other practitioner can create a specific energy, and you're just sitting next to them and trying to figure out what it is. You are trying to pick up on it. This will be very easy because afterwards the practitioner can tell you if you were right or wrong. So there is a way to verify it, to verify that what you picked up on was correct. And this can be very, very interesting. I have, for example, done a lot of these exercises with different people, and the things you sometimes pick up on can be a little bit scary even. For example, I once picked up on a friend's migraine, or I picked up on the fact that they were doing meditations and visualizations to open their third eye. And their third eye area, when I felt it, literally felt like a laser. So it can be very, very interesting what you pick up on. And you can make it easier or harder. So training with someone else will always be a go-to. Oh, and while I was just opening the door for the post-delivery man, I thought of one more thing, and that would be that if you want to train your clairaudience, so the hearing part, then of course you could train with a spirit and tell them to, for example, say your name or say something else very specific, a specific sentence or something like that. Because then again, you know what to expect, you know what would be the right thing to pick up on, you know how to verify your own sensations. Of course, you could say, yeah, but you already know what the spirit is going to say, so you could fool yourself with it. But I kind of feel like there's always a way to fool yourself with it, and in the end you have to trust your psychic senses. If you don't, then what are you going to do with it, right? So you have to trust in your skills, and you have to trust in the fact that what you're picking up on is correct. And yeah, with that being said, those were my tips for training your psychic abilities. If you have further skills, maybe for specific senses that I don't have a lot of personal experience with, so if you have tips for clairaudience, clairgustance, and what is the last one called? I don't know. The smelling part. If you have tips for those senses, like specific ones, not like the ones that I gave you, so specific exercises, not necessarily just picking up an object and then trying to sense it. If you have tips like that, any advice, then put them in the comments and then maybe I can pin some if there are some exercises that sound fun. As always, I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up and ring the bell down below so you're notified whenever I upload a new video. Feel free to check out my other socials, and if you want to support this channel, then check out my Patreon or my YouTube membership. And I will see you in another video. Bye!